العوافي يا جماعة, and welcome to another episode of Tmasha مع Brian. So I think before we delve into today's episode and talk about whatever topic is our discussion today, I think I would genuinely, like to take the time to thank everyone for all the support. We're at episode 10 now, which I think might be the first milestone of many in this podcast. And so again, I would like to thank all of the listeners, everyone that supported me throughout this, all the help that you guys have provided, all the advice that you've given me. It's priceless, and I just wanted to say thank you. And now we move on to the topic of the day. So this episode's topic is my journey through uni/art school and the lessons and kind of changes that I underwent and the lessons that I learned throughout the experience of going through uni. And to start off this, I think it's only right that I talk about how the process went when I got into uni. So initially, أنا كنت average student, I would like to say, although probably كنت below average. I think it was just that school didn't get to my head. A lot of teachers used to say that بيركز بالصف بس ما بيعمل شغل بالبيت. So I think it's more of procrastination. But anywho, I just finished grade 12, and I was basically deciding on what I want to do when I get into uni. Now, obviously, for anyone who's part of a Lebanese family and has Lebanese parents, you know the kind of pressure that comes from those parents. So مثل ما كنا عم نحكي آخر مرة مع ساري بالبودكاست إنه يا حكيم يا مهندس يا محامي, فهول الأشياء المهمين. Any other major is just disregarded. So when I got the form from the university and I needed in that form to fill in 3 majors, or the 3 majors that I would like to apply to, my dad was sitting next to me, and I was pretty good at physics when I was in school, sciences in general. So obviously, he made the first 2 picks, which were mechanical engineer, and I think electrical engineer was the second. And the third, he gave me the option. He's like, just pick whatever you want. And I think because he just assumed that I would go for the first 2 or one of the first 2. And so I'd recently heard about architecture. I didn't know what it was. Oh, heck, out of the blue, I just decided to put that as the third option. So I applied to the university having mechanical, electrical, and then architecture in the mix. And there was entrance exams that I had to do. And when I did those entrance exams, I actually qualified for all 3 of those majors. So I could pick and choose whichever that I needed to do. The only thing that was left was that architectural school required an interview with one of the deans of the faculty. So, and based on that interview, they would decide whether you could go into architecture school or not. The architecture school I was applying to was obviously in the University of Balamand. It was Alba. And so I decided, you know what, let's go see this interview. Now keep in mind, like I said, no idea what architecture was. And so a day before the interview, I decided, I was like, you know what, maybe it would be worthwhile that I do a little bit of research on what architecture is before I go into that interview. And so I went on old computer, turned it on, went on the internet, and looked up architecture. And the first image, and I'll still remember this, that popped on the screen, كانت a very famous architect, and his name is Oscar Niemeyer. And for those of you who don't know who Oscar Niemeyer is, he's one of the most celebrated architects in the world today. He's Brazilian. But also he had an impact in Lebanon because للي بيعرف معرض رشيد كرامي اللي هو بقلب طرابلس, which is this big huge pavilion meant for recreational and social events and book fairs and all of that, that was actually designed by Oscar Niemeyer. But due to the civil war, it was not completed and then stayed at that state. But even uncompleted, it's still a very monumental work in Tripoli and in Lebanon itself to get someone, an architect that big and that famous, to be able to come and design something there. And so I saw the images of Oscar Niemeyer and I looked it up and I was like, this seems pretty fucking cool. So like my job is to kind of design stuff like this. I'm okay with that. And so with what little knowledge I gained from that interview, دبيت غراضي the next day ورحت على الانترفيو. So I step into the interview, and for the people who are listening to this, who are also Alba students, you probably know the professor. He's not even an architecture professor, he's a graphic designer, I think. And his name is Joe Baine. So I sit down with Joe, nervous, hoping that whatever information I had gathered about architecture school would actually kind of get me over the line and get me accepted. And to my surprise, we started talking about music, movies, hobbies. I even remember specifically, like, he was asking me what book, if I read any books, and I told him yeah. And he asked me which one, and I said Da Vinci Code. I was recently reading that, and I was really into it because of that, like, kind of mindfuck element that was there. And so he asked me, he's like, oh, so you like that kind of mindfuck thing? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay, then I have a recommendation for you. And he actually recommended a movie which is called The Devil's Advocate. It's Keanu Reeves and Al Pacino, and I think a lot of you need to watch it because it's an amazing movie. But also, like, he just suggested this movie, and then we kept talking about hobbies, what I like to do, and everything like that. And then at the end of it, he goes, well, that's the interview. And I go, I'm sorry, but like, you didn't ask me any questions about architecture. And you didn't ask me any questions if I know how to draw or anything like that. And he's like, that's not the intent of the interview. The intent of the interview is not to see your capabilities, because that's what our job is. Our job is to teach you about architecture. Our job is to teach you about drawing and how to draw. But what we want to know is, do you have the capacity to be creative? Do you have the ability to use your imagination to create and to design? And so that for me was kind of the first thing that I learned through uni, is that sometimes you have an expectation on what you feel is going to happen, but when you don't have the expertise in that field, you don't realize that sometimes that expectation could be way off. And so when I was thinking about, I need to learn about architecture to get into the school, the reality was I just needed to show that I had the capability to understand what it meant to be to design, and to have the capacity to be able to channel in my creative intuition. And so we end the interview, and he goes, "We'd love to have you in the faculty. You'd fit right in." And I stepped out of the office, going back home, the big smile on my face, because generally I enjoyed that interview and I enjoyed that interaction, and I enjoyed what that would imply about architectural school. And then comes the day where I had to decide on which major I was actually going to go in. So at this point, I have been accepted in all three. And with the interview, I'd also been accepted into architectural school. And so the choice was up to me. Now, lucky enough, when I had to make that choice, my father wasn't in Lebanon. He was in Australia, or I think he was overseas somewhere doing something. And so I think this was my first ever rebellious act, or like kind of breaking away from the system. And I made my choice of picking architecture and submitting my application. And I remember I gave my dad a call that same day, and he's asking me like, شو قدمت على الجامعة؟ قلت له ايه قدمت وكل شيء وحطيت الابلكيشن. قال لي ايش نقيت، ميكانيكال ولا الكتريكال؟ قلت له لا نقيت architecture. And I remember there was a bit of a pause, and then ليه ومدري ايه whatever, and like, but still I made it clear to my dad that I appreciate his help and everything, but this is my choice and I wanted to make it. And so that's how we kind of started on our journey into architecture school and into art school as well. And then we get to the point where it's the first day. And also, before we carry on with the story, I remember this because as I was stepping out of the door for my first day of uni, my mom grabs me and she goes like, look, I want you to go and have the time of your life, because the memories you're going to create here would probably be some of the best memories you'll ever have. And I will testify for my mother by saying that she was 100% right. And I think it's just the ability to take in the whole experience and to genuinely give it its all, which kind of created those memories for me. So a shout out to my mother, who always spits out words of wisdom. هيك بنكون قاعدين مان وبتكب لها هيك جمله هيك هي وعم بتمسح وانا بتطلع انه برو شو قلتي انت هلا مان خربتي الدنيا like philosophy 101 bro. But anyway, I think we'll definitely get to a point where we'll have a podcast episode with my mom along, just so you guys can get a sniff of that wisdom as well. So I go into uni. I'm starting the first day. And one of the great things that I think I experienced in art school is the fact that in the beginning, there is no architecture, there's no interior, there's no graphic design, there's no CGIM, sorry. There's no majors, there's just art. And so it was a collective experience of people of different majors or different artistic majors doing the same thing. So we all studied visual language, we all studied sketching, we all studied painting, we all studied color theory, all of us. And it was architecture students, it was interior design students, it was graphic design students, and as well as CGIM students. And I think it was wonderful to see that no matter how you branch out later on, when you want to start in any artistic manner, the fundamentals are the same and the building blocks are the same. So it doesn't matter if you're just going to be using a PC and you're not going to be drawing. You need to understand how to sketch a human body. It doesn't understand if you're working on logos and will never design buildings. You need to understand perspective. And so these were kind of lessons that were taught to us subconsciously. So we were there complaining about, oh, why do I have to sketch this or why do I have to do that? And we only kind of reaped the fruits of our labor later on when we started realizing that whenever I wanted to sketch an idea in my head, it was so simple and so fast because I had that rigorous training before. Even though I don't necessarily design logos or do this or do that, the fundamentals always need to be the same. And so that's also one of the lessons that I learned, that sometimes when we place a goal or we decide we want to do something, we look at the larger picture. But the reality is, in order to achieve that larger picture, there's a lots of small bits of bits and pieces that need to come together to form the big picture. And so that's kind of what we learned here. Like, the reality is, no matter which big picture one of us wanted to do or wanted to go down on, or majored in, we still all needed to piece it together in the same building blocks, which were sketching, painting, drawing, visual language, and even courses that are theoretical. For example, movie theory or music theory or movie appreciation, where we used to sit down and watch movies for Stanley Kubrick, or music theory where we'd listen to Beethoven and understand the theory behind that, because as a person that's learning to be a creative and an artist, you need to appreciate art in all of its forms. So cinematography included, music included, and all of that. But I think one of the greatest things that these first couple of years did is that, because art school itself is very rigorous, you need to spend a lot of time working overnights, trying and failing and doing all of this. And when we did it together, it created bonds that are inseparable. And these bonds, I have the privilege to share them with people that I now call family because of that. And because I sat down to that graphic designer friend, or I sat down next to that interior designer friend, and we helped each other get through these art projects together. We started to love one another, to be more wholesome with one another, but also to see their potential in their own majors. And so, having experienced the first part of art school together, we also got to witness how each one of our friends, or I got to witness how each one of my friends blossomed in their own major. And I got to appreciate their work because I understood what it took, because we both went through the same shit together. We both went through that same long overnights drawing paintings, and oh my god, the WhatsApp chats and the photos in the middle of the night. Where I remember this one instance with two of my friends, Leia and Elissa, and shout out to Leia Zuhbi and Elissa Ibrahim, where we had to do some painting. It was visual language, or I think it was theory of color or something like that. And I felt so confident, like I'd worked on it all day. And I took a picture and I sent it to them. I'm like, guys, look, I've done it early. I'm going to sleep. You guys can stay up all night. And then I remember one of them, I think it was Alyssa, she goes like, I think, if I'm not mistaken, you've got the colors in the wrong positions. And then I looked at the chart and she was right. So same night, I had to scratch it all off and start again. But like, this is what I mean. Experiences and memories that last with me till now, and probably till the day I die. But it's beautiful because these experiences themselves help me appreciate my friends and appreciate their flourishing in their majors. For example, I remember, and a shout out to my friend George Sissin. I remember I was there for his final project, and I used to see his work, and he was a graphic designer. And I saw his work and I got to appreciate the effort that goes in there and the artistic creativity that's found in there. Or whether I had friends who did computer graphics and imagery, and they designed video games. They 3D modeled cartoon characters and made short movies. It's beautiful because of that shared experience in the start of art school. I was willing to stay there, support them as they were going through their final phase, and see how their artistic creativity blossoms, which also they did the same to me. They reciprocated with me. My friends were there when I graduated and the day I did my final project, and I'll never forget that day. And I think that's one of the things that happens when you have a collective experience, especially in art school, is that you start to realize that there's more than one way to be creative or to be artistic, and it's refreshing because, again, the same thing with kind of some of the topics that I've talked about in the previous podcast. It's just the fact that you get to appreciate the effort that goes into these. Now, obviously, as we kept going through art school, and I generally started moving towards more architectural elements. So we started designing projects, we started drawing plans, drawing sections, understanding 3D geometry even better, and generally starting to model spaces. That's when I started to realize that there's a big difference between art majors and other majors that were in university. And the big difference is that one is extremely objective, while the other is extremely subjective. And so the assessment is done in that same manner. Now, what do I mean by when I say this? So, for example, if someone's doing a math test, there's no doubt whether the answer is right or wrong. There's one right answer and everything else is wrong. It's math, it's fact, done. So if the answer is 56, if you got 56, you got it correct. If you didn't get 56, you got it wrong. So there's an objectivity to the way you're being assessed and you're being graded. Same with chemistry, biology, whatever it is. You're following a certain system or curriculum that decides where you get points and how you get them. And you get it right, you get a point. You get it wrong, you don't get a point. Meanwhile, art and any artistic matter is subjective. And so it had to impress the subject that was assessing. It had to invoke the subject that was assessing, and it had to show the creative intent to the subject that's assessing your project or whatever it is. So that's, you could have designed something and looked at it and be like, bro, this is amazing, I think this is great, and then you can get someone that comes along and says, bro, this is complete garbage, I don't get it, I don't understand, and I think it's not worth the marks. And that was the risk. That was the risk with doing art school, is having to battle kind of that subjectivity where there could be a lot of instances where you would put in a lot of effort, but in the end, it would just go nowhere because it's a subjective matter. So if you have a crowd of 5 people and 4 of those people don't like your project, that means your project's not good, or it didn't do the job that it was supposed to do. But like I said, with an objective major, that's not the case. You just math, physics, chemistry, biology, whatever it is, there's correct answers and there's wrong answers. There's no, oh, I don't feel like he deserves this grade. No, no, no. There's no feelings. There's no creative kind of influence. There's nothing. There's just right or wrong. And so that kind of was a pivotal moment, especially in art school, is to start to realize that genuinely the way I'm being assessed is not on right or wrong, but on the creative intent of my project, which led to another kind of realization, is that going through art school, you realize that the best way to overcome that subjectivity of the profession is to generally give your all into the creative intent that you have for the project. So I've witnessed a lot of projects and a lot of art projects done at Alba and during art school, and some people just, they do something that's half-assed. They just submit something, and you can tell when the conceptualization of the idea is not there. You can tell when the full creative intent is not there. And that itself would always guarantee a low mark. So I understand that there's a subjective matter to my profession, but one of the things that would always guarantee that I would not even come close to passing was if I half-assed kind of the intent behind my project. And so we learned through that subjectivity, because we had professors that weren't the same. Our projects weren't assessed by the same professors over and over. Every project we submitted, we got a fresh batch of new teachers and professors to come and assess. And sometimes they were interior designers, sometimes they were architects, sometimes they were urban planners. So of different various fields as well. And in every scenario, no matter what the pool was of the guys assessing your project, creative intent and being genuinely true to what you conceptualized. So you've considered. I think design is when you create something with consideration. So it's not just that something is built this way, but I've built this way because of this, and that because of this, and I've designed this curve that way because it symbolizes this. And so when you get and find a way to be able to tie all of the elements that are in your project, whether it's a logo, whether it's an interior layout, whether it's a full building, and to be able to connect them all together and have them make sense and visually create something that's beautiful, that's when you're driving towards the best result. And that's when you kind of reduce the subjectivity. So sometimes you might not like a project, or you might look at something and you might not like it from a design sense, but you cannot but appreciate the effort that's been put in to design it and to connect all the elements that are in there together and to genuinely form it. And so that's when I started learning that the best way to achieve the good results in art school is to stay genuine to an idea. So you've got a project, you've got a blank canvas, you come up with a concept of what you want to design and how you want to design it. And by making sure that you're true to that concept and you're true to that design intent, you reduce that subjectivity and you allow yourself to genuinely create something that's truly beautiful. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us learned in art school and a lot of us need to apply today. Like, especially with today, when you've got something like AI that's design, it's not designing, it's basically drawing or sketching or whatever it is, but it can create elements, but with no general design intent. You need to provide the prompts, you need to provide kind of the idea behind it, and it can model something for you or it can design something for you. But when you just rely on that and don't follow the genuine creative intent that you have, all you're creating is duplicates of the same thing. You're not pioneering in any way. You're not genuinely punching through and going like, I've created something here. You're basically mimicking. And I understand, like, we're a civilization that's 2026 years old. And I'm pretty sure that any creative idea or concept that you think you might have has already been thought of by someone in that span of time. But it doesn't matter if it's been thought of before, because we look at what we had in history and we learn from it and we learn how to utilize it. So if there's a certain art movement that you like, it doesn't mean you can't use it. The idea is to find a way to tie it into your concept or your idea and to stay genuine to that idea, to fully throttle through so that you guarantee that the end result that you're coming out with is just creative intent and thoughtful design. So that's what I think. A lot of people might disagree with me on this, although it's not that controversial. But I think design itself is just considering what you're building. So giving a reason to why you've done something. So there's functional design, which is when you have a chair, which is just a chair. So it's designed in a way where it's going to sustain itself, it's going to stand up on its four legs, and you're going to be able to sit on it and lean back, and that's it. That's functional design. But then you have someone with a creative design where they come and go like, no, you know what? I want them to sit like this. I want the finish of the wood to be that color. I want smooth edges. I want the cushion to be this, of this material. So that's when you start delving into more thoughtful design. And I think that's one of the core things of being an artist and experiencing any form of architectural major. And when you start to understand that it's about creative intent, you start to appreciate and see the various and uncountable forms of artistic expression. Like, I'm talking about art school right now and the four big majors that were there, but I've seen people show creativity in the most unexpected ways where, I don't know, people use junkyard junk and like they weld them together and create art pieces. I've seen people that crochet and create art pieces. I've seen people that spray paint on a wall and create artistic graffiti and beautiful pieces of art. And so you realize that that creative intent and that thing that reduces the subjectivity can be expressed in so many different things. And it's not just in architecture or interior design or whatever it is, but it can be expressed in so many ways. So the medium is not what's important, but the method is what's important. Putting your effort into spraying or creating your design for a graffiti is what makes the graffiti stand out. It's not the fact that it's a graffiti. And the same thing goes with anything. And you could also see that because a lot of my friends throughout uni branched out from the four kind of typical majors. So I had friends who are interior designers that went into lighting design. I have friends, interior designers, that went into furniture design. Like I mentioned in the video game episode, I had a friend of mine who went into video game design. I have people, friends of mine who or actually one friend of mine, his name is Zuhair, or a shout out to Zuhair as well, where he was so good at sketching cars. And for a long, long period, we really always kind of forced him to go into car design because it's a gateway. The method is there and the intent is there. You just need to find the correct artistic impression to be able to show your work. And so that's also one of the things that I learned in uni is that with artistic expression or whatever artistic intent that you want to go through, the important thing is not what or how, or sorry, like it's not the medium, sorry, that you're using to show the artistic expression, but it's the method and it's the staying true to the intent. And I think that's a very important lesson, not just in architecture, in life in general. Is it's kind of when someone sticks to their principles and you use them to guide you through life. And this is the same thing with any artistic project, is that when you conceptualize what you want or you find the idea that inspired you, the best thing you can do is to stick and use that as the beacon or the light that's going to guide you through the design process. Because that's whenever you need a reference on what to do, you look at that and go like, how can I use that to relate to this? And then you find a way. And when all of a sudden you find all the ways, you find that it connects in such a beautiful way. And that's a very invaluable lesson to me. But also, and this kind of came through the whole years that I was in art school, is that creativity and creative intent and the method is amazing, but it couldn't achieve results by itself. And the only way you could achieve results is by grabbing that creative method and mixing it with a lot of hard work. So any person that's gone through architecture school or any art major would tell you about how daunting, how tedious, how time consuming, and how much effort it required to keep going through that art school, the overnights, the late submittals, the sleepless nights, the working on the weekends, the missing out. Like it requires a lot of effort and requires a lot of work, and that's because generally, when you want to express something artistically into show its full potential, you can't half-ass it. You can't go, oh, like, I'll just do this, do that, and that's it. No, 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 no. It requires effort. It requires time. And it's not always time that you're doing something. Do you know how many times I sat there staring at what I was working on, trying to decide what I'm going to do next? So it's putting in not just the physical effort, but the mental effort to really generate what you want, to really create that thing. And the biggest example I could do, and this is a personal example, the biggest example I can give to how you need to combine creative intent with hard work. My final project for the last 4 months before I had to submit, I was not leaving the house. Genuinely. I had set up my room in a way where this is my computer, this is my sketches, this is my notebook where I write everything. All the things that I needed were in my room. I would sit down, let's say I start at 8, keep working, take a break for lunch, keep working until like it's fucking 2 a.m., 3 a.m., depending on what task I had set for myself, going to sleep, waking up the same in the next morning and repeating. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat for 4 months. And it was never like exhausting for me, like physically, of course, but it was never like I was dreading it or I was going like, oh, when is this going to be over? Because when you're driven by that creative intent, And when you're inspired by it and you want to see its full potential, then whatever time you spend on it is never considered a waste of time. Or that's in my perspective. I never considered that the time I spent working on projects was a waste of time. No, I cherished every single moment. And I do today. Whenever I'm working on a certain project of mine or anything like that, I love spending time on it and fucking thinking about it and rubbing my brain and just like figuring out how to do this and how to do that and sketching and drawing and like trying to come up with ideas on what could happen. That's all part of the process, and it's a necessary part of the process, because not only will it help you achieve the maximum result or the best result you can from the product or the thing that you're trying to design, but it also provides a huge sense of attachment to the thing you birthed. Because that's the nice thing, or that's the amazing thing about being an artist or being in a creative field, is that you're genuinely creating. You're creating something, even if it's something that's pathetic, even if it's something that's garbage, even if it's something that's silly or simple. You're still creating something. And that's to kind of generally improve that process. You need to apply the hard work, and you need to sit there and you need to dedicate the hours. And I did that on my final project. And I spent time sitting there and working and putting in the hours. And it showed, because when I graduated with high distinction. So it's not just the creative intent that's there. That's important. The method of designing is amazing, and the way we combine everything creatively is necessary. But all of that is nothing if you don't put in the work. All of that is non-existent if you don't sit there and put in the hours that are required to shape this. So if a stonemason looks at a piece of marble and says like, "Oh, I've got a great idea on how I can design this to be a statue," it's not going to do it itself. He needs to grab that idea he has and spend hours chiseling at that rock till he shapes it into the form that he wants it to be. And so that's the same thing. And that's a valuable lesson as well. So you can see that although the lessons that I learned through art school were lessons that applied to my studies or my architectural studies, they were also in some way or another life lessons. The first being that if you take the time to understand and to comprehend what someone's doing or what someone's saying or anything they're doing, you'll find that you'll get to appreciate it more. Sticking true to what you believe in, or in the case of art school, sticking true to your concept and your creative intent, will always lead to better results. And I think one of the most important until now is that nothing happens without hard work and without you sitting there and dedicating time to achieve a better result. Results are not, they're not thrown about. You got to work for them. And so those are some of the lessons that I learned throughout school, and are lessons that stick with me. But also, I think one of the biggest things that changed me from when I went into art school is that architecture itself, and now I'm going to speak about architecture rather than just art school, but studying architecture itself, it's not like studying any other major, because I don't consider architecture as a major. I consider it as it's a lifestyle. You're visualizing the world around you in a completely different sense. So it's not, now every element that I look at and I'm intrigued by, I think of the design intent, or what effort was put in to actually design something like this. Whether it's a building, whether it's the interior of a train, whether it's the mechanics of a watch, whatever it is, having spent that time appreciating art and studying architecture and studying all of those different bits and pieces of creative outlets, you start to appreciate and look at everything in a different lens. And that's why for a lot of people that know me personally and have been with me anywhere, if I go anywhere near a city, my head is always tilted upwards and I'm looking at buildings. Not because I'm just amazed by these buildings, but because sometimes when you look at something and you just try to spend time understanding how it's designed or why it was created, it provides a bigger sense of appreciation for that element itself. And so it's it's been a privilege. I think I'm quite lucky to have been able to take that initial rebellious act, which I will always go back to it. I don't know what it was that pushed me towards this. A lot of people told me, "Do you know how to draw?" before I applied, and I was like, "No, I don't know how to draw." And they're like, "Oh, well, maybe you should think about something else." And a lot of people said this and that, but I think the core thing that helped me kind of decide what I wanted to do was that interview. Was just someone that came and had a conversation with me about what I like to do and what I would like to be. And I think that's also kind of a lesson for us later on, especially when we get to a point where we start having our own families and our own kids, and we want them to be what they want to be. And I think no one in this world is born bad at everything. I think everyone has a special talent that they're good at. It could be anything. It could be playing basketball, could be painting, could be photography, it could be, I don't know, whatever it is, selling products. And your job in this life is to help these kids, or as a kid, your job as a kid is to find what it is that you're good at. And so I think having had that conversation with Dr. Joe Baine, I realized that there's something inside me that wants to do this. And so it gave me the balls to take that decisive step and to just take it and go, I'm going into architecture. So I think that also kind of helps us understand, or helps me understand, what kind of method you could use to transmit a message to someone and help them understand what they want to do in life. And I think with that, هيدي حتكون the the end of today's episode, which again is episode 10. I generally can't believe that this is happening. I want to again thank everyone for everything that you've done. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. Let me know what you think in the comments. And also, I want to know what you like and what you don't like. If there's things that you don't like about this, please let me know. I want this to be more of a debate. If there's something that I said that you don't agree with, please hit the comments and let's have a chat. Because for me, I'm down for having the chat and having the talk and just seeing those different points of views from every one of you. And with that, I would say goodbye وهيك وشكرا.